Alright, Chapter 11, Training Computer Users. This is kind of a long chapter. There's like 60 slides. I'll try to get through it as fast as I can. And with that, we're off. So, objectives, blah, 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 blah. So, what is training? Obviously, we all know what training is, so we'll move on. Education is a little bit different from training. Education is more long-term skills or thinking skills, problem solving. You know, when I learn, or when I'm educated on how a two-cycle engine works, you know, I can repair that engine. I can do different things with that engine. But if I just get trained on how to fix an engine, I may not understand how all the parts work and how they all go together. So that's kind of the difference. Training is more for immediate use, short term, and then education is more long term. So training focuses on performing activities and building expertise. And you get the idea. So they have the 4P model: plan the training, prepare the training, present the training, and then progress towards higher quality user training, which means we need to think about the training that we just did, and then what can we do better, or what was actually really good and what was really bad. So the first step, plan the training. You got to think about who's coming in. Who am I training? Am I training a group of nurses? Am I training a group of older people on how to use a computer? What's their background? Do they have any knowledge of that subject material? And then what do they need to accomplish when they're done? So when they're done with the training, what should they be able to do? So when we're thinking about the trainees, we need to think about their skill level. Have they ever seen this before? Are they intermediate users? Are they advanced users? Advanced users don't like to go through, remedial, that basic kind of stuff. And then their age. Typically, young people are more apt to be distracted, things like that, where your older adults tend to focus more on the content, while seniors tend to kind of float around the la-la land. Alright, I digress. But honestly, as far as that goes, you're going to see different people at different age levels. You're going to see some youthful people that are good learners and some youthful people that are not good learners. You're going to see some seniors that are awesome learners. You're going to see some seniors that are not awesome learners. And you'll see it's across the range, or the spectrum. I had a PC class years ago. I was at the visiting nurse service, and I was teaching these nurses how to, I had a basic computer class. And the very first thing I did was I had the users all sit down at the PCs, and we were talking about the PC, and I said, all right, turn it on. And then I had one lady actually picked up her mouse, and she was clicking the button like it was a remote control. Because back in the old days, remote controls weren't wireless. They actually had a wire that went to the TV, and you used those. And so she thought the mouse was a remote control. So it was kind of funny. And then their motivational level. Are they required to attend? And this is the big difference between high school and college, and where some kids have an issue adjusting. In high school you have to go. You're required by law. You have to be there, so you don't want to be there. Where college is totally different. It's you want to be there. You're paying money to be there, and you don't have to attend classes. So for the most part, we get more, use in college. We get more education in college than we do in high school because we don't really want to be there. Alright, so you need to determine what the trainees already know. And you could maybe do a pre-test, or you can interview the people on the first day, and then have notes and say, if they know all this stuff, then I'm just going to go to here, but if they don't, then I need to make sure I need to cover this. And then you can always talk to the supervisor and say, hey, after this training, what do you want them to be able to do? Or, the people that you send me, what's their knowledge level? And then remember, you need to have alternate levels of training. Not all people learn the same way. Some people learn by hearing, some people learn by reading, some people learn by doing. So you want to have a shotgun approach and a little bit of everything in your training. That way you kind of hit everybody. Alright, that one's self-explanatory. Alright, determining the skills. You'll have to find out their level. Are they at the concept level where they're learning to use the basic vocabulary of whatever you're doing? In Cisco we have acronyms like EI, GRP, and OSPF and things like that. Do they understand? Are they able to explain concepts? Are they able to perform basic tasks? Are they able to perform advanced tasks? So you should always give them a learning objective, which is just a statement of the knowledge and skills that the trainees need to learn. And then the performance objective, which is just a statement of what the trainee needs to be able to do at the end. So, my learning objective might be, I want to give you the knowledge about how an engine works, and at the end you need to be able to, rebuild this engine or something like that. And again, you can move that to the PC as well. I need to be able to rebuild the PC, or I need to be able to troubleshoot basic problems on a PC. Alright, but your training objectives, they need to be measurable, and measurable means I need to be able to measure it. So one of my objectives should not be, well, understand the basics of, engine performance. Well, how do you measure that? How do you measure their understanding? You want to give something more like, user can install RAM, user can format a hard drive, user can reinstall an operating system, because those are things that you can actually make them do and watch them do it and then measure their performance. All right, and then you got to prepare the training. In a lot of these corporate things where you do training, like, hey, train users on Outlook. It's not like college where we're given a book and everything's kind of laid out for us. We have a book, the chapters are already written, so we know like what order we're going to cover the material in. So if you're going to cover something like Microsoft Outlook, for some Office users, you're going to have to decide what topics you're going to cover. You're going to have to organize those into, how am I going to do these in which order, that kind of thing. And then you're going to need to decide, how to get those ideas across effectively. And then the big thing is, what do I not want to cover? Obviously, I don't want to cover anything that I'm not knowledgeable about. But if it's something that the user needs in order to be able to complete what the supervisor wants them to complete, then I'm going to need to focus and learn that material. Think about how much information you're going to cover. Is it too much? The last thing people want to do is go to a training session where all they do is listen to somebody talk for 2 hours. Most people typically have a 30 to 40 minute attention span, and after that they start to drift. So anytime you're thinking about talking or giving a presentation, try to limit it to that time frame, no more than 40 minutes. Alright, and then organize the topics. Obviously, you want to introduce things first, then you want to build explanations, build understanding, then you want to focus on basic skills, and you want to get into the expertise stuff. So this is just a simple template, introduce the trainer, review the topics, introduce a new topic, establish motivation, blah blah, you kind of get the idea. So to decide how am I going to do this? Is it going to be a class? Is it going to be a small group? Is it going to be one-to-one training? Am I making a self-guided tutorial like online? Obviously, anything that you do that's self-guided online or whatever, needs to have more material in there to help the users. Some users are going to struggle with your stuff, and other other students are going to be able to go through your stuff a lot faster. Some students may want some extra guides or material on that subject where other students really don't care. So the online stuff really needs to be more thought out. Alright, classes obviously are cost effective, a single trainer for many trainees, you get the idea. Disadvantages, some trainees are reluctant to ask for help in a large group. When you're in there with 15 or 20 other people from work and you have a question, you don't want to feel stupid and get made fun of in front of all the other people, so you're afraid to ask questions. And we get that in college too. Sometimes I'll do a long lecture on EIGRP and know that there are people that have questions and ask if anybody got any questions, and then see no hands raised, and know that there's at least 3 people there in that class that have questions but are afraid to ask. So when something like that happens, make sure that you start asking questions and say, hey, all right, give me the 5 basic things of this, or tell me how to do this, and then check for understanding. All right, small groups. They're more trainee to trainee interaction. There's a lot more social learning. Smaller groups tend to perform better and bond better than obviously bigger groups. But then you have to have a lot more training sessions because you have a lower number of trainees coming through. One-to-one training is awesome if you can get it. We typically don't see this. We get what they call on-the-job training, which means we get hired in and they pair us with somebody and we work with that person until we feel comfortable on our own. The problem with on-the-job training is, who do we typically assign the new person to? Sadly, in most organizations, the new person is not assigned to the highest performer. We typically assign them to the lowest performer to give them something to do. And then our new guy builds the same bad habits of the lower performer. So think about that before you decide to assign somebody for on-the-job training. All right, then get the self-guided stuff online or whatever you want to do. Again, a lot more stuff that has to go into there because you have to plan out, oh, I got somebody that's weak, I got somebody that's strong, that kind of stuff. Where in a regular class, you can kind of talk to them about the different things. If somebody is strong and they ask a question, you can answer it. But online, you're not there to answer the question, so you have to provide that material. And again, everybody learns differently. That's kind of self-explanatory. Some people are visual learners, some people learn by hearing, some people learn by doing or experimenting. So this graph kind of shows you people that just listen or read tend to have lower retention of that information. Where people that watch somebody do something tend to learn a little bit more and retain a little bit more, and then doing the task yourself and problem solving it, obviously you get the most retention of that knowledge. All right, then your book talks about Bloom's taxonomy of cognitive skills. And he talks about knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and then evaluation. All right, the delivery method. How am I going to deliver my material? Is everybody going to be able to sit at a PC? Am I just showing stuff on PowerPoint on a screen? Or is there no screen? Am I just going to lecture, blah, blah, blah? And that's not very effective. So different methods, lecture methods, reading assignments, online reading assignments, visual aids, you kind of get the idea. All right, lecture, they say the advantages, obviously it's a traditional familiar environment, but really the big benefit of the lecture is the lecturer is there to answer questions that you have. Reading assignments, blah, terrible. Who wants to sit there and read a textbook on C++ for an hour? So the big thing with reading assignments is you have to make sure that they're can be completed in the time allotted. You don't want to give somebody four chapters to read this week because how much of that information are they going to retain? Then online stuff, it's kind of self-explanatory. Group discussions are much better. People actually will get more actively involved in small group peer-to-peer learning experiences. If I pull 6 of you guys in a room and we start talking about PCs or something like that, you're more likely to get involved in the conversation and you're more likely to be motivated by that conversation because we're talking about things that you want to talk about and you're part of the active process. All right, and then visual aids, obviously there's all kinds of different stuff you can use, pictures, charts, diagrams, maps, that kind of stuff. And they say, choose simple designs with careful use of colors, fonts, and artwork for emphasis. Steve Jobs was really good at this. If you ever get into like doing presentations and training people and stuff, there's a couple books about Steve Jobs, and really, obviously, he designed, invented Apple and that kind of stuff. But really, he was well known for his presentations, and he would just show like a picture on the screen, and then he would talk about the picture, and people were able to retain a lot of information from his lectures or his presentations. All right, and then there's multimedia materials. I can do sound, I can do videos, things like that. And those can be used to reinforce the material. Handouts, handouts are good and bad. Obviously, if you give your handouts at the beginning, people are always looking at those instead of watching and listening to you talk. But it's nice to hand those out at the end, especially like cheat sheets. But if people know they're coming, then they won't really like take notes and stuff on the material because it's, I'll just take the cheat sheet. All right, demonstrations are cool. If I can demonstrate, how to, reset the router password, and then hand you a router, you should theoretically be able to do that. And as long as the demonstration isn't videotaped or something like that, as I'm doing the demonstration, if you can ask questions, that is awesome. All right, then tutorials, self-guided stuff, step by step, do this, do that, are typically very effective. And then a hands-on activity. Typically once you show the user how to do something, you want to reinforce that knowledge. So you want to give them some kind of hands-on activity to do. That's why in most of our classes, we lecture and then you do something. So you'll on my Web 2 classes, you'll watch the video and then you'll come in and then you'll actually work on something of that material. All right, then your book talks about case studies, which are larger hands-on or teamwork projects. And then we go into role playing. Woo! And a lot of times this is an effective tool. If you can role play, well, like a help desk, and then people get to role play the different users, and then you can be funny with it, and it's hilarious. But then I think about watching this guy struggle when somebody is being an unruly user. Then later on in my career, when that unruly user comes in, I'm more likely to think about that moment and what I should do to handle that. So role playing can really come in handy, and it's a lot of fun. All right, then your book gets into collaborative or group learning, which again is kind of the stuff that we do in class. We typically break you guys, like in the Cisco class, we break you guys into groups, and everybody works on the equipment. There's computer-based training, which obviously we have lynda.com. There's a bunch of different websites you can go to get tutorials and hands-on activities to build stuff. Then there's web-based training, which is really kind of the same thing, but it's just on the web, not on your PC. And then I discussed the changing role of trainers. Back in the old days, it was 90% preparing the material, and then only 10% presenting it. But nowadays it's not like that, because there's so much material that's online that we can use, that we can now focus more time on the actual presentation, doing different things, role playing in class. You get the idea. Developing specific training materials. And again, most trainers nowadays don't have to develop the stuff. A lot of the stuff is developed for us. We have textbooks, we have trade books, there's YouTube with videos on how to do different things. So luckily with that, there's a lot of that specific material that's already provided for us. But then once you do your training, how do you assess your training? How do you figure out how well your training went? Do you do a test? Do you do a quiz? Do you have a hands-on activity? And what happens if somebody fails that hands-on activity? When do you announce in the training that they're going to have to do a quiz or a test or a hands-on activity? Do you wait till the end when they've kind of slept through the whole thing and then they realize, oh crap, I got to do this test? Or do you do it at the beginning so that they focus more on that? And then however you're evaluating their training or your training, is it enough? Like in the C++ class that I'm teaching, we have labs that we have to give. Hey, develop a program that does this. But the majority of these programs, students can go online and actually find where somebody else has already made these programs for other classes. So is that really effective when they're copying that material over from the internet, just making a couple of changes so that we can't tell that it's copied? Are they really learning how to do that stuff? So you have to think about all that stuff that kind of goes into it. Is your training assessment going to be accurate? And then once you're done with training, you want to have some way to evaluate it. Do people feel that your training objectives were clear? Can they do what you wanted them to be able to do? Were the training aids useful? Did they think it was well organized? And then here's a sample training evaluation form. You get the same thing here at Stark State. Every class that you do, there's some kind of evaluation form where you can evaluate the trainer and the class and the materials in the class and the equipment in the class and just the environment of the class. Were there enough desks? Were there enough computers? That kind of stuff. So finally, now I have to, I've done some research on the users coming in. I've prepared my material, so I now do the training. So you should theoretically practice your presentations, and especially, and not to kind of get outside of the training thing. If I'm going to go to an interview for a job or something like that, I tend to practice my answers to questions. Like if you go to the career development, which is down in the S building in the very corner there by the ATM machine, they have a sheet that shows you like the 50 most asked questions in interviews, and you can ask yourself that and kind of practice your line, I guess, or your answer, and that way when somebody asks you that question, you can kind of hammer it out. So it's like, boom, this guy's fast, he's quick on his feet. So some other things, make sure you arrive early and check out the facility. Make sure that the slides work, the projector works. You understand how to use the material. If you go there and all of a sudden it's an Apple PC and you're like, oh crap, how do I use this? You're going to need time to figure that out. So make sure you focus on the most important stuff. They say use humor sparingly. I tend to use it too much. Pause for comprehension checks, and make sure you're checking for understanding. When you've discussed the 5 principles of blah, make sure you ask them, okay, now that we've talked about the 5 principles of blah, who can name the first one? Who can name the second one? That kind of stuff. And that way you're checking for understanding. Provide frequent breaks and obtain professional feedback. Woo! So, presentation tips, always do a practice run, family, friends, even some stuffed animals, however you have to do it. But you'd be surprised what you can find just doing a practice run. And then get to the facility early enough that you can do maybe a dry run and check the equipment and make sure everything works. Are the chairs comfortable? Is there enough lighting? Is there enough equipment in the room? That kind of stuff. So presentation tips, use notes in outline form. You don't want to read the entire presentation from a piece of paper. You don't want to read from PowerPoints. Oh, that's terrible. You guys hate it when professors do that. We hate it when we go to conferences and stuff and people are lecturing like that. It's terrible. If I just wanted to listen to somebody read PowerPoint slides, why wouldn't I just read them myself? All right, and then avoid trainee questions that might get a little bit off track. We've got a couple students that will typically start throwing out weird questions, and they try to derail the conversation, and you want to make sure you're able to bring it on back. And a quick way to do that is just to say something like, just getting away from his material. So, hey, all right, let's get back to the material and focus back on the train of thought or something like that. All right, cover the important skills first. They say avoid features that are the bells and whistles. And that's the interesting stuff. Well, why would I want to avoid the interesting stuff? I don't know. But it's infrequently used, I guess is what they're saying. You want to make sure at the end of your presentation that they can do what you want them to do. So once you've got that done, then you can focus on the entertainment portion. All right, prepare occasional quick check comprehensive questions. Give me the 5 tips of these or the 3 things of this. Make sure you're reading their body language. If everybody's sitting there with their arms crossed or their heads are buried or they're sleeping, obviously things are not going very well. Make sure if you have long presentations, you have short breaks. Like if you've ever been in one of my classes, my lectures tend to be less than an hour long. And then I typically have some kind of activity that day that reinforces that training. So like I'll lecture for 40 to 50 minutes, and then you'll have like an hour lab that you'll do that works through the material I just covered. And that way, between those two, there's always a break, and you can always go to the bathroom, whatever you need to do. And another neat thing is if you can actually have somebody videotape your presentation, you'd be surprised how many times you say or different things, or have weird things with your hands and that kind of stuff. So then obviously, each time I provide training, I want to get better. So nobody's a perfect trainer. I don't know any instructor at the college that is a perfect professor or a perfect trainer. So you always want to look for feedback. And don't be afraid to hear the bad things. If somebody says, he didn't speak clearly or he spoke too fast, which is one of my issues, you want to look at that and then say, how can I do that better? Which is why now I tend to put a lot of video lectures in my class, and that way after I'm done with my lecture, if I went too fast and somebody was afraid to stop me or slow me down, they can go back to the video lecture and they can kind of see it from there and kind of go at their own speed. Alright, so obviously you can check your beta test results, you can check the performance test after your training, you get feedback on your training, you get observations from your colleagues, all kinds of different ways to evaluate your performance. You want to keep your stuff quality. You're going to have to keep up on the material, especially anything that involves around IT means that you're going to have to always be learning new stuff. And I've seen this happen over and over again. I saw the guys that were really good on Windows NT, and when Windows 2000 Server came out with Active Directory, they're like, I'm not going to learn that. Nobody's going to go to that. I'll just stay here with Windows NT. And then eventually they found themselves outdated and out of a job. The phone guys, as phone systems all started converting to network-based rather than the old POTS, plain old telephone service lines and that kind of stuff, those people lost their jobs because they didn't keep up with the technology. So in short, just never stop learning. All right, there are learning management systems. Like at Stark State, we have Angel, and we're actually looking for a new one because some company bought out Angel and they're going to discontinue it. So next year, 2016, you may see us have a new one. But it allows you to put all your stuff in one place, which is nice. All right, and then there's a summary. Blah, 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 blah. All right. So in the folder this week for week 13, the regular materials, and for your assignments, you have an on the web and a quiz. So it'll be a nice short week for you. Just the chapter is kind of long, so there's a little bit of reading. So other than that, remember if you have any questions, make sure you let me know. And I guess that's it. So